that's something that I've always moved towards and embraced, is that idea of figuring things out as you go and learning on your feet. Give me a task and even if I don't know how to do it, I'll figure it out. I don't wait for someone to teach me or show me. I'll just go and do something and figure it out as I go. And that's definitely how we kind of did things back then in high school, when I was given that freedom and responsibility to run the show, through to definitely that's helped me as I moved into entrepreneurship and starting my own business.
What if one of the most important skills you can develop isn't certainty, but the confidence to figure things out? In this episode of More Than a Score, we sit down with Ben Amos, teacher turned entrepreneur, storyteller, digital creator, and someone who's built a career, not by having everything perfectly mapped out, but by being willing to learn, adapt, and back himself along the way. Ben's story is that success rarely follows a neat, predictable path, and things build up over time. The career he thought he'd pursue didn't happen. Teaching was originally a fallback, and yet that fallback opened doors he never expected. We explore the teachers who saw something in him, the responsibility that shaped his confidence, the key communication skills from teaching that have helped him by surrounding himself with the right people, and the mindset that's helped him navigate business, change, and uncertainty. If you're a parent wondering how to prepare your child for a rapidly changing world, or someone feeling pressure to have it all figured out, this conversation is packed with reassurance, perspective, and practical wisdom. Welcome to this episode of More Than a Score.
All right, everyone okay? Everyone's feeling good? We've all got our coffees or our AirPods and we don't have any echo cancellation issues anymore.
Yes, this is our first official complete remote podcast. So
completely remote, absolutely. Ben Amos, absolute pleasure to have you on More Than a Score. I am very lucky. I get to do a bit of an introduction for each guest, and I try and do a little bit of research and a little bit of reading and thinking about making it a bit different. So stick with me here. This is what I've got down for you while I've been watching videos, reading up on you, and just trying to get a feel for you. Engaging presenter, speaker, and storyteller, film and media buff, a digital storyteller focused on showing, not just telling, teacher turned founder of production company, a traveller, an early adopter, a dad of two, and a creator, supporter, and very innovative thinker. Ben Amos, welcome to More Than a Score.
Dan, Laura, thank you for having me. That was a great introduction. I loved it. Get that printed on a T-shirt, I think.
Well, do you know what? We can run some new merch, can't we, Laura?
Yeah,
we'll just put that out there. We'll just put that on for Ben with the lovely picture of you.
Probably only need one copy of that shirt or one print.
That's okay. That's all right. Still merch. No, Ben, we're so excited to have you on. And one of the things we do when we welcome people on, the first question we ask is, so when you think back to your time of finishing school or finishing education, were you happy with your score?
To be honest, I was happy enough. If you think about my high school leaving score, it didn't even really matter too much to me. What mattered is kind of where I was headed next. And at the time, obviously it kind of determined university entry, but I had a few options up my sleeve and none of them needed particularly high. It was called an OP score at the time. I think it's called something else now, but, the OP score, didn't really matter to where I wanted to go. So, I was happy. I was happy that I'd finished school. This is high school and, was moving went into university and, I was just open to seeing where whatever I did would take me. So, yeah, I guess I was happy.
Be enough, it sort of sounds like. I'm really fascinated. So when you say you had some other options, just to help the person really get a feel for you before you moved into where you are now, what were the options at that time that you were thinking of?
So I was always planning to go into tertiary, into university of some sort, whether it be, parental expectations or just cultural expectations within my family or peer group. But I was always intending to go into university. So I had a few options there that I'd selected, one of them being technical theatre production. So I was, fully into sound and lighting and technical theatre. That one had a much harder entry requirements because they only took a small number of people and it wasn't based on OP, it was based on, an interview kind of process. So that was a little bit stressful. So I thought I really wanted to do that. But then my second option was in secondary teaching, which was easier to get into potentially, right? So that was kind of a fallback for me. So I ended up not getting into the technical theatre production and ended up in teaching. And, I didn't realize it at the time, but actually, really valued that and really enjoyed that process of learning to become a teacher and going through my pracs and then becoming a teacher. So, and it really kind of started me on the journey that I'm today, which we can dive into. So, having that fallback and being happy with the fallback, I think that's kind of what I meant by I wasn't particularly worried about which direction I ended up.
Can I ask, so you said that film and lighting and all of that was where you wanted to head. When did you start getting clarity on that was the direction you were going?
Yeah, 100%. During school, the experience I had with my high school teachers of those subjects, both of drama and of film, were pivotal teachers to me who made a difference, because they respected me and they respected others as well, as humans, not just as students,
Yeah.
And I think we've all had teachers who, particularly in those senior year 11 and 12, those senior ages of high school, when they give you autonomy and they give you respect, and they also teach you how to be, a human. I had that in high school, and that led to me developing a passion for these things. I was also in a really fortunate position, which I don't think would be possible these days, but I became the kind of head of the technical crew for our high school hall. So our high school had a hall which was hired out to other third parties and used it for our own musicals and events and things like that. And it was a student-run technical crew. So the teachers didn't know how the sound and lighting and so on ran within the hall. It was only the students who passed it down to the next group of students to of come in as the tech crew. And I was given so much responsibility that I was signed out, master keys to the school hall that I had as a year 11 and 12 student. So I would come in on the weekend and bump in, set up lights and sounds with the rest of my team, who were like two other friends of mine. But I was the kind of the main technical lead, I guess. And that taught me a lot, and it gave me so much passion for the industry as well. But I don't think schools would be allowed to do that these days, to give, master keys to students and to give them the ability to be on school site, without supervision and so on. But I don't know, it was possible at the time, back in the 90s. So.
But, you're a high school teacher. I've been a high school teacher for a long time. You have to select those students, because even though that it's probably unlikely to even occur these days with everything that we have to manage, but you're still not going to give that kind of autonomy, freedom, responsibility to anybody. What do you think your teachers saw in you to trust that you could do that and that you were the right kid for that responsibility? What do you think you were sort of exhibiting at that time?
It's a good question, and I don't think something I've really reflected on.
Because you're a high school teacher. You don't give those keys to just anybody.
No, I mean, I guess I must have shown some level of responsibility and maturity of some sort. And I would like to think at the time that I was mature and responsible, although, I was still a teenager. I still got up to mischief, and still got up to some form of mischief, even with that responsibility and that freedom, but still got the job done though, right? And got the job done in an excellent way that meant that the performances or the third-party hire of the hall, would comment about how great the tech crew was that made their performance go fantastically. So, we would have fun. We're probably a little bit cheeky and irresponsible at times, but we'd get the job done. So it made other people look good. And so I guess we're given more freedom and more responsibility as a result of that. So it's a good question.
That's really interesting, Ben. So already what's emerging is, because you used the word prac before, just in case for anyone listening. So prac, when you're going through your teaching degrees, like practical round, you go do your teaching rounds sort of thing. But already what's emerging, if I'm listening correctly, is so the ability to go actually practice things is the thing that also impacts you. It helped you when you were teaching, so you got into your practical rounds, got to learn that. But then at high school, you had this moment of people actually letting you go practice and do the technical work for all the productions, all the different things. I reckon that's fascinating. We've had someone previously on as well, Dean, who was lucky enough. So his was similar but very, very different in that they supported him to practice and learn around surfing. So they had this sort of centre of excellence for surfing up in Queensland, a school as well. And your one, it sounds like too, is they gave you the opportunity to also practice and sort of develop your skills, but in a completely different area as well. But now, which has had such a profound impact on the work that you've done.
100%. And on reflection, I think that's something that I've always moved towards and embraced, is that idea of figuring things out as you go and learning on your feet. I've always been someone who, not that I won't say no to something, but sometimes I'm guilty of that, but I'm always like, I'll figure it out, just give me a task. And even if I don't know how to do it, I'll figure it out. I don't wait for someone to teach me or show me. I'll just go and do something and figure it out as I go. And that's definitely how we kind of did things back then in high school, when I was given that freedom and responsibility to run the show from a technical theatre standpoint, through to definitely that's helped me as I moved into entrepreneurship and starting my own business. And still to today, when I take on things that probably never really done before in business, I'll work it out.
What are the top 3 things that you continually lean on when you're figuring things out? Like, what are the sorts of either tasks or directions that you take, the top 3, when you're trying to figure something out?
Yeah, good question. I think the first one is just unwavering positivity. And my wife sometimes kind of pulls me up on this, because she's a little bit the opposite. Not that she's a pessimist, but, she kind of talks about, you're just overwhelmingly optimistic. You just have this blind faith that things are going to work out for the good. And maybe sometimes that's to my detriment. But that's probably the first thing is, I always, like I said, I always go into something thinking I'll be able to figure it out. It might take me a bit of time. I don't really know exactly what the right pathway is to get there, but, let's just go and we'll figure it out as we go. So that optimism, I think, is probably number one. The other thing is just embracing that idea of learning. And obviously today, it's just so easy to learn a new skill or to figure out how to do something based on other people's experiences, because you can go to YouTube, you can go to AI, ChatGPT or Gemini, and you can figure out how to do things that you maybe would have taken you months to learn or years to learn in the past. These days, you can figure out very quickly how to do things, or at least steer yourself in the right direction. So embracing that learning mindset, I think, is number 2. And number 3 there probably is about not being afraid of failing. So I talked about optimism, but the fact is, like, I can be overwhelmingly optimistic that things will work out, but things don't always work out. And I've learned that over the years, particularly in business. You can go into something with, this is the plan, this is where I want to go, but it doesn't always work out. But there's always some sort of learning from there, and maybe it's a pivot and you end up going in a different direction. And that's where the optimism kicks back in, because it's not so much a failure. It's more about, okay, so it didn't quite get there, but now we're going here, So yeah, that's kind of what I've lent into over the years, I think.
There's this work by a guy called Shane Lopez, which is all around like hope theory. And sometimes people often say is hope isn't a strategy. But what they sort of sometimes think is like people have put hope in someone else's hands. I hope it works out. Whereas listening to you, with hope theory, they talk about, so you've got agency. You think you can actually do something. You've also got some really clear goals. So for you, there's something around like film. There's also something around supporting people's stories, being able to be connected to this production. So you've got this clear thing of the thing that you enjoy doing, and then you can also see some pathways that you can take to get there. So it's not passive hope. You want to just say, oh, we'll see what happens. It's, no, I'm really clear with what I want to get to. I'm aware that there's different pathways, and I think that I can actually take action because I'm not going to let failure stop me. I know I need to learn, so I can choose to lean into that. So it sounds like you're not just an optimist, but also really hopeful for yourself.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that hope theory is an interesting one, because there is that. I think you're right in the way you talk about there's passive hope, right, which is just wishful thinking, right?
Yeah.
Which probably doesn't serve anyone. But then there's active kind of pursuing of a hopeful outcome. And I think that's how I operate, making things happen.
Yeah. And Ben, I think we'll come to that idea of, because you touched on your world as starting the business. So when you moved away from being in education, being a teacher, and starting your business, and then what you've discovered, and you were around a similar time as YouTube was sort of really taking off, and around that period of time too. So we'll come to that in a little bit, but I just thought, what else should the listener know about you and the way that you see the world or try and learn? What's something that you think would be really helpful for them to know now? Because often our listeners are either a person going through a bit of a transition or a change, trying to work out what it is they need to do, or they're trying to help someone. So already I'm getting really excited by hearing you talk because you have this really great view of the world and the way you approach it. But what else do you think is really helpful for a listener to know about you and the way that you like to approach things?
Yeah, I mean, I think one of the key things for me is that idea of constantly learning and adapting and changing, but also being open to sharing with others. Like, I think everything that I've done, for whatever it's worth, is there's always been the support of others there as well. And surrounding yourself by the right people, I think, is one of the key things as well. And, even bringing that all the way back to the right kind of grounding people in your life. Like, I would never have been able to have left a teaching career behind and start a business without my now wife, who is, like I said, like, she's not completely opposite to me, but she is a bit less kind of that optimist, more of a realist in a way, which is a good kind of offset to some of my stuff, because she's not that she's necessarily perfectly happy in a government job. She works for Queensland Health, but she's got that very stable job, which has enabled me to, be a small business owner, which isn't always stable, So having the right people in your support team, and that comes down to, as I've kind of grown in business and got the right employees in my team and, the right people in my network and the right coaches supported me in business over the year. But I think that's important, and that's become really clear to me, surrounding yourself with the right people.
We coach and work with different people. And so the coach in me wants to know, when you say the words right people, what is it that you look for in the right people? Because if I'm a listener and I'm thinking about who could I try and help my child or my young person or myself get those right people for me, what do you look for in the right person that supports you?
I think that's a very nuanced answer. I don't think there is a clear, this is the right answer to that. I think it comes down to what do you need from that person, or what support do you hope that they provide you? Obviously what's right in a, life partner or wife, someone to build a family with and be that emotional and physical support from a life perspective is different to, say a business coach or an employee. So I think what it comes down to is, well, for me, I think it's probably the way I approach it anyway, is I don't really know what's right until I find it. And on reflection, I'll look back and go, how fortunate that I've got that person in my corner, or that I've, built this relationship. The idea of digging the well before you're thirsty. I don't know if you've heard that phrase before, but I kind of approach business and life, and it's this, if you're looking in video, this little sign behind me, which is blurry back here, says lead with value. That's kind of one of the mottos or mantras, I guess, that I kind of live by. What that means to me is if I seek to kind of add value to others, if I put value out into the world, then it's going to come back and support me. I do believe that, if I can just do good and help other people and support other people, then the right people are going to come and support me. And that's kind of how it's worked out, the business coaches that I've kind of worked with over the years from a business perspective have been right for me, because I've typically kind of added some value to them and they've added value to me. And then I make it a formal kind of a coaching relationship. The people that I coach as well, I've added value to them, and then they've sought to kind of formalize that into a coaching relationship. Business contacts, like my network in business that's helped grow my business is, because I've added value to them over the years. So I don't know if that answered your question, but that's where I think
if I listening to it, so it sounds like you seek people that are generous, that are willing to, it's not just transactional, so they're genuine. So people that want to take an interest, and then they are also they want reciprocity, like they want it to be two-way. So by helping someone else, that something's going to come, but it's a genuineness. It's not doing it so that you get that back. Did I get that right though? Is it sort of that idea of you want to be generous, you want to be able to share, you want to be aware that by doing something might come, but you don't do it for that reason, and you do it just for a genuine want of wanting to help people?
Absolutely. Yeah. That reciprocity is, I think, really an important aspect of human nature, I think, which, needs to be considered, and reciprocity is a two-way thing, right? So
it's funny you say that. I love when I'm looking for the right kind of person to support me. So often I need someone, and Laura, this is why Laura and I actually bounce off each other so well. is I really love good communicators that can also sometimes be really direct with me, because I love a good challenge, and Laura sometimes just tell me how it is and I go, great, that's exactly what I need. So I actually really love, when I think of people that support me, it's someone that can actually be really direct at times as well.
I wrote down here too the idea that you're looking at what support do you need from the person in that position. I thought that was really interesting. It's not like I just want this from everybody. It's like, well, what if I'm being intentional about how I want this person to fill a certain position in my life? It's like, well, what do I need from that person in that place? And I think it's that idea of differentiating between, somebody you need as a life partner versus a business coach versus employee versus a friendship and mentorship. And oftentimes it sort of comes naturally, where those people start to actually fill those roles based on the skills that they have, rather than necessarily being like, need you to be this. It's like people sort of become those based on the skills that they have and where they and you place them in the right positions, almost, it sounded like.
Yeah, I think it's sometimes there's intentionality with that for me, and sometimes there's just serendipity, I guess.
Yeah, it's nice.
I don't always go out, actively kind of going, where's the next person to do this for me? But sometimes it is serendipity, but then there is an intentionality to adding value to that person and, seeing what value comes back. And I think that's something that you can just think about, like, how can I make this person's life better or help this person?
Yeah. And it's, you're being really proactive, listening to what you're saying. So again, if for someone like the listener, if they can think of, so going back to your idea of being intentional, so if they know they're the young person they're supporting, or someone that's either going through school or finishing school or going through a bit of a change, they can start to think, well, what is it that they might need right now? They could even have a conversation with them. And then they start to think, use the word business network, but you might even just think of people that you know that you could then connect your young person to set up some sort of serendipitous conversation, coffee, something that might then lead to something down the track. But I think listening to you, if we're intentional about it, it's more likely to occur than if we just, again, go passive and stand back and just wait for something to maybe happen.
Yeah.
But we also don't want to be that really too intentional where you're off searching, saying, right, who's the right kind of person? It's nuanced, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think advice that I would give there is seek to lead with value as well. So it's not like if you are, that person trying to connect a young person with someone who you think might help them progress in their career or their life in a certain way. I don't think it's about reaching out and saying, I need you to mentor my son or my daughter, or, I want you to help us do this. I think it's like, how can I flip it and go, well, what can we add? What value can we add to this person's life? And then, lead with value first. And, I even think about some virtual mentors, and I use inverted like air quotes there. Virtual mentors of mine are, some people who, run podcasts and YouTube channels and, are influencers or creators who I've learnt so much from, but they've never met me, in many cases. They probably don't even know I'm out there. But where I have furthered those relationships with those people, and many of these are people who I'd now call, friends or actual mentors or coaches, are people who I started, just listening to their YouTube channel or watching their YouTube channel or listening to their podcast. But then I reached out to them. I made that contact and thanked them for the value or, shared a win that I have had because of what they've shared on their channels. And you'll be surprised, I think, that, apart from maybe the massive names in the space, but many of those people who are out there putting their teaching into the world through podcasts and YouTube channels, they don't get a lot of feedback. They might get some, but they don't get a lot. And if you can reach out to them and add value to their life by just thanking them or sharing a win that you've had in your life because of something they've shared, that means a lot to those people. And you can start to build a relationship like that with those people who you might think are maybe untouchable. I think that's good advice for a young person who maybe looks up to some creator or someone. Look to action things that they teach and then reach out to them and, share the win that you've had or what that has meant for you, what they've shared. And you'll be surprised how much that means to those creators or those influencers or those experts, even if they're on the other side of the world.
It's really interesting. We often talk about like these nonlinear pathways, which is ultimately something that you've kind of course corrected. but nothing's ever a wasted opportunity. And you said before that you wanted to get into this particular course, difficult to get into. You went into the fallback course, which was education and teaching, in which you did for 7 years. You taught for 7 years in Queensland, but that you were grateful for that opportunity. I'm wondering what you learned from this kind of fallback career or the nonlinear pathway that you're still using today.
Look, the teaching career that I had, even though it was just 7 years, I think, solidified my teaching skills, I guess, and my ability to, well, it did a lot for my public speaking, because as a teacher, you're standing in front of a class, so being able to do that is massive, I think, in business or, in many other career pathways, to be able to stand up and speak in front of people and communicate clearly. But maybe it was in me prior to, studying to be a teacher and becoming a teacher, but I've always been a teacher in some way, I think. Like, I've always found myself like wanting to teach others or share what I know with others. So then that's something that's continued on. So, as I've gone into business and then I've gone into speaking and, coaching and creating courses and writing a book and all of that is teaching in a way. That is, taking what you know and what you do, building it into a framework that makes it more communicatable to others, and then over time learning how to best communicate that to others so that they take it in, and then doing that over and over again. That is what a teacher does, So definitely the fallback into that teaching career, I think, has continued to serve me really well as I've gone on to the rest of the stuff I've done so far, because teaching's always part of it somewhere.
And they sort of talk about in I don't know who the they is, but they, with regards to when you think of, I guess, the world of YouTube and different things, there's almost like two paths, isn't there? There's entertain and then there's educators. And it seems like the path you've taken in the way that you work and what you're doing with the business and the online work you do is all about actually educating people and helping them learn and discover different things. Ben, is it all right if I do a quick little shift? Because I'm mindful of us starting to think of that moment of, and Laura, great segue from being a teacher through to business owner, and then really, in this digital world. So I think you've gone from graduating high school, you moved into a teaching and an arts degree. You then majored in film and drama, taught in secondary schools in Queensland, as Loz said, for about 7 years. And then you moved to the UK and Ireland for 3 years, took on a bunch of different roles. And one of them was you actually got to work again in the Edinburgh Film Festival. You then moved into a video production company over there. And then after learning the craft and discovering more about that, when you moved back to Australia, I think at that time, is that where you met your wife too? I'm just going to get a nod as well when you're overseas.
No, so I met my wife in London, but she was from Brisbane. So
yeah, of course. There we go. That's what it takes. So you move back to Australia and then you start your Innovate Media company around 2008, married, you have your first kids, you become a dad around 2011. And then you actually add your business now, Engage Video Marketing, to that production company. When I read all that out, I mean, film production, digital work, that seems to be a really big piece of that. So my question is, given your work in the digital world, content creation, and also this love that you have of actually helping people, what are the critical skills that you think young people need to focus on now?
Yeah, it's a really important question, because I think it's changing all the time at a rapid pace, right? The skills of like technical skills that I would have said if you wanted to get into content creation and media production, in the past you might have been thinking about, okay, well, you've got to, learn how to film and edit and, do all of that technical stuff. But really, that really doesn't matter. That's easy to learn, or it's easy to adapt and try new things in that space. I think that one of the key things that would move people forward today is just learn how to be a good communicator. And good communication is the skills of good communication, I think, are irrespective of the medium in which the communication takes place. I think clear and empowering communicators know how to take an idea and translate it in a way for an audience so that it lands for the audience and makes a difference to that audience. And whether you do that through a YouTube video, whether you do that through a podcast, whether you do that through a 30-second TikTok video, or whether you do that by manipulating AI tools to create content. I think the foundation of being a good communicator, I believe, like I said, is about taking an idea and then translating or transmuting that idea into a format that someone else can engage with and take on as their own idea or learn. I think that's a skill that is never going to go out of date. It's never going to be superseded by technology. And one of the best ways to do that is through storytelling. You know, I think you referred to me as a storyteller in that introduction. And I think storytelling is one of the most human, like innate human forms of communication, effective communication anyway, that's, you know, goes back through the eons, you know. So I think, learn how to tell good stories, learn how to be a clear and, you know, impactful communicator. I think that's going to set you in a really good way.
Storytelling is such a powerful thing right now. I mean, it's interesting that we're watching podcasts become so big over this last sort of 5 to 10 years. It's almost like we're going back to this thing of wanting to engage in stories and learn from, I don't know, tens of thousands of years ago, where we've always been sitting around talking, doing what we're doing, albeit not with microphones and maybe remotely, but the campfire's gotten a bit bigger these days. But yeah, there's something about storytelling and people wanting to go back and learn from each other.
Yeah, absolutely. And storytelling takes on so many different forms. I mean, you think about the micro forms of storytelling that so many young people just are surrounded by today, you know, with social media and short form video content and TikTok and so on. The creators that succeed in that space, or the videos that, you know, go viral, in inverted commas again, are the ones that connect with an audience in some way, whether it be surprising or in an entertaining way or an informative way, or something that people connect with on a human level. And in many cases, that's like micro storytelling. That's making that connection happen.
If I am a young person right now, early in my career, or I'm looking at finishing school, so it's being able to understand how, and when you say tell stories, it's be able to share an idea or a message and at the same time be able to connect to people as well. Is I'm thinking about, at the same time, we're hearing constantly that the attention span of people and the ability to actually focus is also going to be a core skill because of all the different demands that we get. So you're really great at telling stories, sharing an idea, and then connecting it to someone else's experience. I'm interested to know, given that focus is something that people are talking about, how do you stay so focused so that you can actually stay focused on the right things? What is it that helps you focus?
I mean, I'm not always good at that.
Well, admitting that we're not always good is the first step. All right, great.
I think by nature, as an entrepreneur or whatever I call myself, there is a bit of squirrel syndrome. You know, there is a bit of like looking at something exciting happening over here and pursuing it for a bit. But you know, that can be a danger though. Like if you aren't too unfocused, then you're never going to achieve anything. So, you know, a lot of what I've had to learn over the years is, you know, using different strategies and tactics to kind of maintain focus and direction, such as goal setting and breaking goals down into achievable chunks, and even, you know, using things like paper checklists, you know, like that helps me focus. You know, sometimes I feel there's too much going on and I'm being pulled in too many directions. So then I turn away from my screen or whatever I'm working on and pull out a piece of paper and just, you know, draw some squares on the side and write my checklist down. So, you know, some of those finding whatever it is that those tactical things that you can do to maintain focus and put up guardrails around your focus, I think is important. So whether it be guardrails around time or, you know, how I use my time or how I time block my calendar. So I'm like, I know that I've got like an hour to do this task that I put in my calendar, and kind of be letting myself down if I don't get it done in that time that I blocked for that thing. But had to kind of learn these things over the years, and I'm not always good at them either. Sometimes I break my own kind of rules. So yeah, but I think it's a constant struggle for anyone. I think, you know, if anyone's cracked the code of like permanent laser focused, it'd be great to know. That's not me.
I think you might potentially do it to your own detriment, right? If you're laser focused, then you might sometimes miss other unexpected opportunities. But listening to what you're saying too, there's really clear links to what you said at the very start, that you're open to failure and that you're always wanting to learn. So you're doing that by you're trying to learn how you can keep getting better and better at setting up these habits so you focus on the right stuff, but also know that you're not going to do it perfectly and you're trying your best.
Yeah, and give yourself some grace.
I'm really curious. You've been in the video content creation for a long time. You've obviously seen that ramp up in terms of how much content is now out there. When you go about creating visual content, what are the sort of checklists that you like to make sure you're achieving? We talked about focus, the fact that how do you sort of create content that you feel people will focus on, or that will be that will add value or will engage an audience? What kinds of things do you look to create?
Yeah, it's a big question. Well, it's a short question, but it's a potentially big answer. But
Sure.
I think the foundation there is about really knowing who your audience is. So when you're creating any piece of content, recognize first and foremost that you're creating it for an audience, right? And knowing who that audience is and what they care about, what will they pay attention to? Successful content, particularly when we're talking about online video content, is all about attention and relevance. It's kind of two filters, I guess, to run through. So attention, first of all, if you can't capture the attention of the audience, and the way you capture that attention is by creating content that is ultimately hyper relevant to who they are and what they care about in that moment that they potentially come across that piece of content. And then if you can't, so even if you capture the attention, if you don't maintain the attention, then you don't get the retention, right? When we talk about video, it's retention is how long people watch that content for. And that's how you maintain attention long enough to communicate the message that the video is intended to communicate, whether it be a humorous message or an educational message or whatever. So if you can really know your audience and know what value you're going to add to them through this content, and recognize that you need to capture that attention before you can ever even assume to get any retention, right? So that, particularly on short form video content, that's why the first few seconds, the hook is so important.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's probably at the foundation, is think about attention and relevance and try and capture those two things.
Ben, listening to you talk, I was mindful. I love listening to people that have real expertise and knowledge in different areas. And I think a potential elephant in the room is, imagine if I'm a parent of a child that maybe isn't as familiar with the digital world. Like now there's more people watching YouTube than TV, like regular TV.
Yeah.
If I'm not as familiar with the digital world, access to all of these different ways to share stories and, the potential career options and pathways, what advice would you give to a parent so that they can best help their young person that maybe has an interest like you did in film and television and production and media? What advice would you give to parents to help them either learn and discover, or ways that they can then support their young people?
I think as much as possible, I would suggest to be curious, don't, I don't mean this the wrong way, but don't be lazy. I think too many parents feel that they're too disconnected from the things that their teens or their kids are into, or they think, I just don't understand TikTok, or, I don't know what Snapchat is, so that you just do your Snapchatty thing over there and I don't care. But I think if you be curious and you ask your teen or your child, tell me about it. Like, let's sit down and let's watch some of this together. Let's be active consumers of this content, not just passive, mindless scrolling of things, but have a laugh at some of the YouTube shorts that they're watching and that their algorithm is serving up to them. Sit down with them and watch that stuff. And I try and do this with my daughters, for example, who are 11 and 14, nearly 12. So that's why I hesitated there, but currently 11 and 14.
You didn't forget, you were working with fun to say.
Oh, yeah,
what would she want you to say?
They keep changing.
12. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. She thinks she's 12. But anyway, obviously social media ban here in Australia for under 16s, but, my kids still, are able to access, and they watch YouTube shorts, for example. But I make a point of just sitting down with them sometimes and watching what they're watching, whether they like it or not, and just actively learn from what they find interesting and then find opportunities to open up conversation there. So, whatever that looks like for you, I think, don't be lazy, be curious, and educate yourself around things that they're interested in as much as you can. You don't need to be the expert.
I think that really comes back to the teaching background, don't you think? Like being a media teacher, I mean, it's all well and good for you to come in and serve what you think is really exciting and engaging, but at the same time, as you said, know your audience. Like you need to be like, what are the kids actively engaging in? And also it creates an opportunity, an English teacher here creates opportunity for critical conversation. You know, this is what you're watching, this is what you're entertained by. Let's actually take a step to consider the purpose and what's going on here and where are the biases and where's the agenda. You know, I think that really serves well if you can engage with them on the content they're already watching versus you bring them into your world. And I really loved when you talked about the message for parents. You said support and guide them, offer them opportunities and open doors for them, but do not assume. Don't tell them who they are. Let them show you who they are and then create opportunities based on that. I think that was really great advice that you offered.
Yeah. Yep. Love it.
I think, take an interest. Ben, I'm very mindful of your time and I know that you've got to run pretty soon. So the one final question I have in a really brief way is what's one new thing that you're currently trying to learn?
Oh, look, I'm absolutely fascinated by AI and its impact on our industry, but in a positive way. I think AI, I am really uncertain what it's going to lead to in the future because it's changing so fast. So definitely I'm hyper-focused on what is happening and paying attention to and being at the forefront of what's going on there. So I'm excited and scared by AI, to be honest. Yeah, that's I think something that everyone should be paying attention to.
Yeah, it is here now.
You said excited and scared. Can you tell me one thing that is exciting for you and one thing that's scaring you about AI?
Oh, the opportunity is exciting, right? The opportunity for changing the way that we work, the way we create, the way we interact with technology is huge. And then what scares me about it, I think potentially is that, if it gets in the hands of if it's used, any tool used by the wrong person can lead to negative consequences, right?
Yeah.
So there's scary aspects to it, but
but
ultimately exciting.
In my family, we would say you're feeling skited, which is scared and excited. Bit skited.
Yep, I like it.
All right, so thank you so much. We could continue to talk here. I think the really important thing with all of this too is just that idea of listening to you. It's constantly come back to choose to be active, choose to be engaged in it, choose to reach out and make connections, not just for yourself and people, but also like connections to ideas so that you can keep learning. And throughout the whole time, you've kept bringing it back to you're really interested in just continuing to learn and understand it all. Thank you so much for sharing the story, all the pathway that you've taken from way back when you started getting master keys in a school through to actually becoming the teacher that probably had the master key all the way through to starting up this business and what's helped you just there.
Yeah, thanks so much. It's been a great conversation.
Yeah, thanks, Ben. It's so lovely to meet you.
You too.
Thanks, Ben.
Take care.
See ya.